Some people think they can mock anyone they want, but wait until you hear how my daughter's boss insulted me at her workplace without knowing I'm the man who actually owns the entire company. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I've spent the last 40 years building a business from the ground up. Brick by brick, late nights, early mornings, endless sacrifice. And along the way I learned an important truth. You can tell more about a person by how they treat someone they think is powerless than how they treat someone they think matters. And this story is one of those moments life throws at you to remind you exactly who people are when no titles or nameplates are involved. It all began on a regular Tuesday morning when I decided to do one of my unannounced walkthroughs of the company, something I've done quietly for years. Never telling managers when I'll show up, because if you warn people, they show you a performance instead of the truth. And the truth is all I've ever cared about. Now, my daughter Emily had been working here for 6 months, but she insisted no one know she was related to me. Not even her direct supervisor, because she wanted to earn her own respect, her own position, her own reputation, and I loved her for that, so we kept it quiet. No special treatment, no favoritism, nothing that would give away who she really was. That morning I wore simple jeans, an old jacket, nothing fancy. Nothing that screamed owner, and walked through the lobby like just another visitor. And as usual, most employees were kind, polite, and helpful, but then I reached the marketing department and everything changed. I had barely stepped inside when I heard a loud, mocking voice behind me saying, "Who let this old guy wander around here? He looks lost." And a few people laughed nervously. The kind of laugh that says, "I don't want to encourage this, but I don't want to get on your bad side either." And I turned slowly just in time to see Emily's boss, Sandra, smirking with the kind of arrogance I've seen 1,000 times in people who mistake their tiny bit of authority for actual power. Emily was standing at her desk across the room, her face falling the second she recognized me. Panic in her eyes because she knew exactly what Sandra had just done, and she knew Sandra had no idea who she was talking to. Sandra didn't stop there. She walked closer and said loudly, "Sir, you can't just wander into departments without permission. This isn't some community center," and the way she looked at me, like I was beneath her, like I didn't belong, told me everything I needed to know about how she must treat employees when no one important is watching. I stayed calm, nodding politely, because losing my temper wasn't going to teach her anything. And instead I said softly, "Just passing through. Don't mind me," and kept walking, quietly observing how she snapped orders at people, micromanaged every tiny detail, rolled her eyes when juniors asked questions, and behaved like she enjoyed the fear she created instead of the teamwork she should have inspired. I finished my silent review, taking mental notes, then asked the operations manager to gather all department heads for a meeting, and the moment the announcement went out, the whole office shifted, people stood straighter, whispers spread, and Sandra strutted toward the conference room like she owned it, not knowing the real owner was the man she mocked 10 minutes earlier. When everyone settled in, I stepped to the head of the table, placed my notes down, and the room went dead silent, except for the sound of Sandra's breath catching in her throat, her face draining of color as realization hit her like a truck. I began the meeting normally, thanking everyone for their hard work, reviewing upcoming projects, addressing performance numbers, and talking through goals for the next quarter, all while Sandra sat stiff, trying to shrink into her chair as though invisibility was suddenly her greatest wish. Then I said, "Before we end, there's one more thing." And you could feel the air tighten because people know when I say that something important is coming. I continued, "Today I walked through several departments, and most of you made me proud, respectful, hardworking, professional. But I also witnessed something deeply concerning from a member of leadership." And every pair of eyes in the room shifted immediately to Sandra, even though I hadn't said her name. I turned to her slowly and said, "Mocking someone you believe is unimportant doesn't reveal anything about them. It reveals everything about you." And she opened her mouth, trying to defend herself with, "I didn't know, I thought," but I lifted my hand gently and said, "Exactly. You didn't know who I was. And that's the problem. Respect should never depend on knowing someone's title. The room stayed silent, heavy with truth, and Emily, who had kept quiet the entire time, finally stood and said clearly, "Dad, she talks like that to employees every day," and that confirmed everything I already suspected. What Sandra didn't know was that HR had been receiving complaints about her for months. Anonymous reports from employees afraid of her temper, afraid of losing their jobs, afraid of speaking out, and her behavior toward me wasn't a mistake, it was a pattern. After the meeting, I asked her to speak privately, giving her a chance to explain because fairness matters even when people don't deserve it. But instead of apologizing, she doubled down, saying she was simply enforcing discipline, claiming weak employees need tough leadership, and that told me everything I needed to know. By the end of the day, she was suspended pending a full investigation, and when the news reached the team, it was like someone opened the windows and let fresh air into a suffocating room. People smiled again, talked freely again like a weight had been lifted off their shoulders. Emily approached me quietly afterward and said, "I'm sorry you had to hear that," but I shook my head and told her, "No, sweetheart, I'm glad I did. It showed me exactly what kind of leader your team deserves and what kind they should never have again." And that evening, as I drove home, I realized something important. Power doesn't expose character, opportunity does. And Sandra took her opportunity to reveal exactly who she was. And sometimes the universe has a funny way of delivering justice, like letting someone mock the wrong old man, not knowing he's the one who signs the paychecks, owns the building, and built the foundation they stand on. And in the end, the real victory wasn't humiliating her. It was restoring dignity to a team that had forgotten what respect felt like.